Hey everybody. So today we're going to be talking about hip replacements and what you can expect if you get one as a mixed martial artist. So about a year ago, or a year before all of the video you're about to see was taken, I got a full anterior hip replacement on my right side. So it was not a posterior hip replacement, it was not a resurfacing, it was a full hip replacement, and it was the anterior approach. And the device I got implanted was a what's called a dual mobility hip joint with a ceramic head. So just for context, because there are different ways this can be done, obviously. But so that's what I had. Now, what I'm going to be showing in the video is what my solo training looks like as a mixed martial artist 1 year post-surgery. This is actually the second video on this subject that I've done. I did another video that showed what the training looked like about 4.5 to 5 months post-surgery. So go back and please look at the Fightness channel to find that previous video if you're interested in more information on the subject. Also, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video as well as all the other stuff we have on the channel. Okay, so that being said, as I go through this, I'm going to be looking at this perspective specifically as a mixed martial artist as opposed to a traditional martial artist or a single style martial artist. So I'm going to show some grappling movements. I'll be showing some striking movements, self-defense oriented stuff, from a variety of styles and a variety of different training techniques. So hopefully you find this helpful. Let's get started. Okay, we're starting off with boxing, or with a punching focus only. First thing you're going to notice here is my foot movement is largely back to where it was prior to my hip replacement. The footwork is not a problem at this stage. Punching in terms of rotation of the hips and the shoulders, not an issue. Basically, my boxing is very similar to the way it was prior to my hip replacement at this stage. One thing that has changed is I've put more of a focus on stance switching, which is not something I did in the past, and that's partially just due to the need to place less focus on just the one side of my body, one hip. Rather, I'm working on grinding away at the other hip now, basically. Here we're seeing some solo grappling technique footage. Here I'm doing an escape drill. There you see me doing an escape from the rear mount position. You'll see I'll use a knee slice there and then sit through to a scarf hold. Got to watch out when you're banging your hip on the ground with that scarf hold. Here you see some overbridging, overbridge escape from the mount. And getting the hips up in the air is not a problem at this stage. It was in the beginning, but now I have no problem doing that. There you see an underbridge, same thing. The hip dexterity is largely back to where it was previously. You're going to see that here in a moment. You're going to see some shrimping, I believe. Here we see some shrimp out of the mounted position and to capture your opponent in the guard. No problem, get those hips up and to articulate them from side to side. A little bit harder is doing a flat shrimp, is what you see here, or knee elbow escape, because you're just basically relying on the hips to get that to hip shifting. Here we see some stand-up grappling movements, break falls and standing up correctly. Not a problem at this stage. One thing that is still an issue, you see when I usually kick before I stand back up, that side kick is hard to get full extension on the right side with that kick. So we're going to see more of that in a few minutes on kicking. Here, the sprawls are much better than they were just after post-surgery. I can get my hips much closer to the ground than I was able to. So it's pretty. I can't get them all the way to the ground, but it's still pretty close. You saw my drop steps there were not terrible. They are slower than they once were, though. I will tell you that. Here we see some ground control striking and submissions, a drill I do pretty often. See when I sprawl and knee the bag, There's no issues there. When I spin to the back, no problem. No problems with the hips. For the vast majority of the grappling movements you see here, there's basically no issues. You just have to start a little slower and move a little bit slower initially and more methodically than you probably are used to, before you have the surgery. Here we see some, I need to articulate that hip to get that stand up and that breaking of the guard. We're going to see on the other side in a moment as well. You just need to be a little bit more careful. I've got a little less dexterity in the hips than I once did, and less flexibility in the hips than I once did. Part of that problem is that I also have to get my left side replaced. I've already had the hip replaced on the right side. Now I need to have my left side replaced coming up in a few months. So here you see again sitting through to that scarf hold position is you just have to be careful when you actually bang your hip on the ground that you don't you don't do it too hard. But most of the movements and on the ground in terms of transitioning from one position to another are not too difficult. There you see I am simulating a Kimura, and stepping over, my hips are not as low as I would like to be on that, but I can still execute the technique. Do the hip switch maneuver into a full mounted position, getting into a high S mount. Even that is not much of a problem with the hip. The articulation is just fine. The additional movements you're seeing here, there's no problems. Here I go directly into a rear triangle on the rear mount, and even getting one hip articulated one way, the other way is not an issue. It's just a little bit slower and a little bit less flexible. Here's the big one, is kicking, right? Here it's quote high kicking, because I'm trying to illustrate the height I'm able to achieve with different types of kicks here. So front kicks are probably my best kick now. I mean, they probably were always my best kick, but that's my right leg. You see, that's the one that had the replacement. And it's a little bit, I have to concentrate, I'd say a lot more actually, to get that on the technique when I throw that right leg kick. I can get it up to the face level, to the head level, or the chin level, but it's more difficult. Here the side kicks are much more difficult than the front kicks to throw. You need a lot of concentration. You got to focus on really turning the pivoting on that back foot and turning your hips over. I'm almost throwing a back kick here. That's the only way I can get any real height. So I can't just pick my foot up sideways to get height on the side kick. I actually have to articulate my hips all the way around and throw it almost like a back kick in order to get any height. So you can see I'm not really up at the head level with these kicks here, but I'm more like at the chest level. I could probably pop somebody in the neck or the chin with it, if the timing is right. And you also want to note that this is basically, I'm very warmed up already when I'm throwing this, when I'm in this video here. Here we see some roundhouse kicks. That's the left leg. The lead leg has not had the replacement yet, but it needs one. But I can still get pretty decent height there. Same thing with the roundhouse kicks. My kicks are pretty much achieving the level of the neck, right? But not necessarily the head on a taller opponent. Here we see the right leg. This is the one that had the replacement, right? I can still, again, I can get reasonably high, definitely high on the body, no problem. And in the right circumstances, if I can get my opponent to bring their head down a little lower, I would be able to get him in the neck most likely, but not necessarily high on the head. Right here, we're going to see some hook kicks. The hook kicks, surprisingly, I can articulate that hip and get them right up to the head level, no problem. Right, but again, it requires a lot of pivot on that back foot. So you see my rear supporting foot is the heel is facing the target completely. Right. So you saw now I'm going with the right leg, right? Even there, the one had the replacement, I can get it back up to the head level, the back of somebody's head, without much of a problem. All right, so a few different types of kicks there. That completely flubbed, but that's a good point actually. When anytime you're kicking, there's a lot more concentration involved and focus on technique and moving the hips than I ever had to have before. I really have to focus on this, especially throwing a higher kick. Here we see some outside crescent kicks. That was on the lead leg, the one that has not had the replacement yet. I can achieve head level with those with the outside kicks. Let's see when we go to the right leg, which is the one that had the replacement. Still, I can get up to the chin or head level with those, you'll see. So I can still whack somebody in the face with that outside crescent kick. And with a reasonable amount of power too, which is kind of surprising. When we go to the inside crescent kicks is where I start seeing a little bit of a problem. All right, so we'll see those in just a moment here. So on the lead leg, not too much of an issue, right? I'm getting up to near the head level, right, or at least high body level. Typically with a crescent kick, you're aiming for the head. So if you can't achieve the head level with the crescent kick, you probably don't even want to throw it in most circumstances. So I'm still working on getting those inside. So there, the right leg, you see, it's that crescent kick is not getting to the head level, not close. It is getting to like the upper body level, like up under the ribs potentially, if I wanted to throw it there, but that's not a kick I would normally throw against an opponent. It would normally come up to the head if I can, so I'm still working on getting that back. Axe kicks, right? So axe kicks, surprisingly, I can do them, and nice and high, and hit the head, come up above head level and come down on it. That you're seeing the lead leg, the one that didn't have the replacement yet. Now we see the rear leg, but even with the rear leg, I can crack somebody in the face with that, or the collarbone. It does take a little bit more effort. You really got to focus on keeping your leg nice and loose as it goes up, and then engaging the muscle and bringing it down, just as you normally would with an axe kick, really. Okay, so here we're going to see a couple of spinning kicks. So spinning kicks were my biggest problem in getting them back. So one of the things that I have done to try to get back to get a higher spinning kick, here we're looking at spinning back kicks, is I actually use my hands for support on the ground here. It's not something I ever did in the past before surgery, but now I do that, and I find that by doing that, I'm not reliant on the supporting hip for balance there as much, because I can rely on my hands a little better. Yeah, the balance is still not great there, you see. I'm basically stumbled around there. Here we see the other side. But yeah, the hand support, which is something I picked up from Taekwondo, one of these odd karate style martial arts, I find much more helpful for the spinning kicks anyway, the spinning back kicks and spinning side kicks for achieving height. And here we're going to see a couple of spinning hook kicks, right? Which have been very difficult for me to get back to where I once was, right? So that's normally the way I would have thrown a spinning hook kick in the past. It just the balance isn't there, and the height on it is not, and the power is not there as well. So none of that is really back to where it once was, right? Especially the balance, you see. So one or two more on that side. You see I'm off balance after I hit. But surprisingly, we're going to see in a moment when I go to the other side, which is not a side I would have ever in the past thrown my hook kicks from, my spinning hook kicks from, they're actually a little better on this side. This is my offside, on the southpaw stance. It's not something I would have done in the past, but I started doing that, and I'm actually, that kick is now actually better than, and higher and stronger than the other side was, which used to be my strong side. So things have changed up. I've had to change up my training a bit in order to preserve my abilities or go back to where I once was. So I can still get some reasonable height there. Right here we see putting boxing and kicking together. So here's this is more like you would be doing in a fight. here I'm just doing kickboxing, so just punching and kicking. What you're going to notice is that with virtually every combination I throw, the height of the kicks, I cannot achieve the same height as I could when I'm just throwing kicks in that previous drill. So when I throw them in combination here, because you're not focused totally on the technique of the kick itself, you're focusing more on stringing together these combinations or stringing together these strikes. For one reason or another, I can't get the height that I would be able to if I just throw a single kick. You're going to see that with pretty much every combination I throw here, and every type of kick. That's pretty much the same concept applies. Potentially if I were to simply slow down the combinations and pause before kicking, that maybe I could get the height back, but you're not seeing that here, except maybe with that hook kick was not terrible. That being said, I mean, you can see the combinations that I'm throwing here. Even though I'm not throwing height on my kicks, by stringing things together, incorporating the punching and the kicking, I'd be able to fight an opponent, at the level that's pretty close to the level that I once was able to, without too much of an issue. Just got to make sure you keep your kicks high enough not to keep kicking somebody in the nuts. So that relatively low front kick there with the right leg. And that's another thing. I have become much more reliant on my front kicks than I ever was in the past. I've always been a big proponent of the front kick as an entry when you're doing kickboxing or mixed martial arts. And but now it's even more so. So basically, that's like my primary entry tool, for closing the distance now is the front kick on most of my combinations. In the past, I would have used side kicks or roundhouse kicks more often for the entry point, but now I'm much more dependent on those front kicks. For the entry and the exit, I should say. You see that on my out kick is pretty much always a front kick now. Occasionally it's a side kick. So we're seeing kickboxing here, again, only punching and kicking. Now we're going into freestyle striking. So including not just punching and kicking, but also knees, elbows, and headbutts. More like a Muay Thai or Lethwei rule set. And so the more I relax my restrictions when I'm doing these drills in terms of what I can use, the more effective are my combinations. So, or the more effective they would be in a real fight. Same as with any situation, but it's actually much more important now that I'm hindered somewhat by my hip problems and the surgery. Now I'm much more focused on using alternative techniques and not being as reliant on kicks as I once was. So I use a lot more up elbows, headbutts, knees, etc. than I would have in the past. I've been focusing on developing those techniques more so than I had in the past. Knees are actually kind of difficult to get the height that I once was able to achieve. Getting a knee up to the head level or a jumping knee is a lot tougher now than it was in the past. The uppercut knee, so to speak. Right? But given that the focus on stringing together different techniques in these combinations, I'm still able to be very effective, in a sparring situation or a fight situation. Again, you're seeing definitely a heavier reliance on the front kicks for entry here. Okay, now we're incorporating grappling and striking. In this particular drill, I'm focusing on using all the strikes I mentioned in the previous drill, and then adding in throwing techniques as well. Right, so not necessarily takedowns where you're taking somebody to the ground, but throws the type you would find in Greco-Roman wrestling or judo, or freestyle wrestling, where you're going to basically take both your opponent's feet off the ground one way or another, right? And then incorporating the striking along with that. So again, the more techniques I permit myself to use, the wider the array of techniques or styles I permit myself to use, the more effective I'm going to be in a sparring situation or fight situation, even with the hip issue. So here, we're still on the throw drill, okay? But you can see, you know, things like that where I use that judo inside inside trip, reap there. I'm able to articulate that hip without much of a problem. So the grappling stuff is definitely, I'd say I'd probably be more reliant on the grappling than striking this at this stage, because I'm able to, my hip is more, you know, ready for those techniques. It's more capable with the grappling style techniques than it is with the striking, especially with the kicking and the knees. And soon in our next drill, you're going to see not just throwing techniques, but we're also going to get into takedowns, hitting the ground, and incorporating not just the striking, not just the throwing, but also takedowns, going all the way to the ground, grappling technique, and submissions. So basically everything together. And that's going to be the most effective for me, as it would for most people, but it's even more important now that I'm hindered a little bit with at the hips, with the lesser ability with kicking. Now I will say with kicking that I'm still not back to my full potential that I think I'll probably achieve, and part of that is because I still need the other hip replacement. A lot of my kicking on the right side leg, which is the one that had the replacement, is hindered by the fact that my left leg has not had the replacement yet, and I've got a lot of pain there. So that supporting leg is preventing me from being effective with the kicking leg, right? But here's what I was mentioning. Actually, still not there yet. But so yeah, with kicking and with knees, the use of the kicking leg that had the surgery, the right side, is definitely hindered by the fact that the left hip still needs to be replaced, and I've still got a lot of pain there. So I expect that after my second hip replacement, which is coming up in about a month actually, a year after that, I'll probably do another one of these videos so you can see what things look like after both hips have been fully replaced and I'm back to my full potential, you know, for my age and etc. and fitness level and all that. But I think that would probably also be helpful for some people. Another thing that I would mention as we're watching this is I'm slower. I'm slower than I once was, right? And that's not just because of my age. It's partially because of the hip. Right? The muscles are just not as I don't have as much fast twitch as I once did. Probably partially as a result of that surgery. But here, as I was mentioning earlier, so we're going in and incorporating not just the stand-up striking. So basically we're allowing everything. We're releasing all the restrictions here. I'm showing striking, I'm showing throwing and takedowns. We're showing going to the ground, grappling technique, control positions on the ground, and going for submissions like that heel hook simulation right there. Right? And then standing back up and repeating the process. That's basically the drill we're doing. But by relaxing all those restrictions, I'm pretty close to what I once was in terms of being able to do this stuff. The only exception being that I am much more reliant again on the front kicking as opposed to other types of kicks, which is not necessarily a bad thing, to be honest, because front kicks, in my opinion, are probably one of the most effective tools you can have in mixed martial arts and in a street fight, as opposed to other types of kicks. incorporating knees, and you see that hip turn to go for the inside trip, control position on the side control, and the cheese slicer choke or bread cutter choke. Again, inside trip on the other side, knees to the body, and the bread cutter or cheese slicer choke. Here we go with a side trip takedown, some elbows, and a key lock submission from the mount. Same thing, taking the back position, side trip takedown, rolling over to the mount, elbows, key lock. And that pretty much concludes what I wanted to show you today in terms of my solo training footage. I haven't gone back to sparring or partner training, not necessarily because of of the hip or my hips, but mainly just as a result of other things getting in the way of me doing that. Life, family, business, etc. So I expect that if I were to do that now, I would have no problem. So a year out, I think you can probably expect that you would have no issue going back to training, pretty close to the level that you were doing before surgery. Definitely not for me anyway, not all the way back to that level, but reasonably close to it. So it's not like you have to give up mixed martial arts no, not at all. I mean, you're going to be able to keep going. So that's the good news. That being said, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share videos on the Fightness channel. This is one topic we're covering. This is a specialized thing, but usually we're looking at, more generalized, mixed martial arts training, as well as fitness training in terms of technique, drills, workouts, etc. So please like and subscribe, and see you again soon.